In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can do a very quick, easy edit of photos like this one using just Snapseed on your phone. Okay, so here we are in Snapseed and I found the image that I want. It's this shot looking down one of the main high streets at the Disney castle, and as you can see we've got those lovely Christmas decorations going on overhead. I'm pretty pleased with this shot, but there are a few things already that I know that I want to do. So I'm going to start off by going into Tools, and the first thing is just to rotate it and make sure that it's actually straight, because the castle isn't quite straight and the road isn't quite straight looking into it. So I just want to straighten that up to about that point, just so that that spire of the castle is exactly as it should be. That looks about fine. I'm going to tap OK. Now that has left some of these lines not looking entirely as they should do. So the next tool I'm going to use is the perspective tool, and I'm going to click in that. I'm going to make sure that it's on free, and when it's on free you've got these little arrows on all sides and you can basically push and pull your image to exactly where you want it. And so I actually want to stretch it out a little bit at the bottom, and I want to just make sure that these at the top, these garlands going across, are all exactly on the same line. So I want the line to touch this bar, this white bar that you saw on screen, on both sides. It does just like that. And I'm also going to pull this out slightly and just pull this across, just to make sure that this is centered. So now, going down the middle of this central column, we've got all three of the it's the Mickey heads, and those all point down towards the castle at the bottom. If we have a quick look before and after, what we've got now is a really nicely centered picture with everything pointing exactly as it should do. That's great. That means that we can move on, and I'm going to go to Tune Image. Now Tune Image is where we do the main exposure editing. It's got brightness, contrast, saturation, highlight, shadows, and that's where we can make a lot of the big changes. Exposure wise, this image is actually already looking pretty good. I do just want to slightly bring down those highlights just a little bit, not too far. If you go too far, then that sky starts having that weird crunchy HDR look that we really don't like. So I'm going to keep them maybe about -6, arbitrary number, but that looks okay to me. And I do want to bring up the shadows a touch, because most of these buildings are falling into shadow a little bit, and by bringing that up we can just help bring those back to life a bit. So I'm going to bring those up to +20. Now there is the ambience tool as well, which I see a lot of people using in Snapseed, and if you overuse it then things start to look very, very fake, very, very HDR. Let's just, for example, whack that right up to the top. Immediately you can see what this has done. Everything just looks very, very surreal, and I don't like that at all, but it is helpful to use it a little bit just to bring up those colors, bring up those shadows a bit more. So I'm going to leave it at +15, and that is all I think I'm going to do with the exposure. If we tap that on and off, we can just see that it's slightly brought those highlights back under control, and it's doing the same with the shadows on the building as well, bringing those up, bringing out some more of that detail. So at this point I want to start getting a little bit more creative, and one of my favourite tools to use in Snapseed is the grainy film tool. Now this basically gives a lot of what would be the equivalent of using like Lightroom presets. It's basically colour toning, and I think there are some really, really nice options in Snapseed by default. And what I do like to do is just go through and tap on every single different one, deciding which one I want to use, because each one affects colours in a different way and you can get very, very different effects. And it's very handy just to flick through them and use it for inspiration, because sometimes it'll give you a different effect than you were maybe expecting, and that might be something that you want to go for. Like I quite like the look of the extra reds in the image here with the L04 one, but I think I prefer going back a little bit. Let's have a look. I actually really like A02. I like what it's doing with the ground here. The sky's a little bit more washed out. So I do like going through. You never know what you're going to find and which one you're going to like more, but I do think L02 looks pretty good, but I don't want the grain that applies by default, so I'm going to turn that right down to 0. And I'm actually not sure that I want so much of a style being applied. So this is what I like about working with Snapseed with these filters, is that you can immediately change the strength from 0 all the way to 100, whereas applying a Lightroom preset, it's basically just on or off. I think 80 may have been a little bit high, so I'm going to bring it down to, let's have a look, I think maybe actually around 65. It's just toning it down ever so slightly from what we first saw. And I'm going to click OK. At this point again we can tap on and off, and I really like what this is doing to the picture. But the great thing about Snapseed is that you can go back into these tools and layer everything up over the top of each other to get much more in-depth effects. So the next thing I'm going to do is go into vintage. A lot of these filters look very over the top, very dramatic edits to your image that you probably might look at and say, oh, absolutely not, that's ruined the whole ambience of the scene. But again, we can tweak them to our liking. So I actually like what number 8 is doing, but it's far too much. So first of all, I want to bring the brightness up a touch to maybe +10. Saturation is fine, the style strength at +20, we can just bring that down to +15. And that vignette, that's what's causing all this darkening around the edge. Now I like a little bit of that, but this is far too much. So I'm going to bring that down, just slightly playing it on and off to see at what point I like the effect. And I think plus a little bit further, 15. I think 15 is the way to go. Flick that on and off. Yep, I think that's looking really nice. So we're going to apply that. Again, each time I like to check exactly what the image is doing. And I think that some of the effects I've applied have maybe undone some of my original tweaks. So I'm going to go into Tools, back into Tune Image, and I'm just going to go to the shadows and bring those up a little bit more, because I do think that particularly the vintage filter that I applied has darkened some of these garlands a little bit more than I wanted. So by bringing those shadows back up, we can just control that. The last tool that I want to use is the spot adjustment, wherever that is gone. It's called selective, actually. And what you can do is you tap on an area that you want to affect, and then by pinching and zooming, as you can see, this red glow that's appearing, and that basically just means that the red is where the effect is going to be applied. And I want that mostly to be around the castle, so I'm going to leave it at about there. And what I want to do with this is up the brightness, I want to up the contrast, and I also want to up the structure. Now the reason being, and this might be a little bit difficult to see, so I'm going to zoom in and see if we can take a closer look. If I flick this on and off, it's just helping the castle really stand out from its surroundings a little bit more. It's the Disney castle. This is the whole focus of the image. This is the hero part of the park. So we really want it to pop out of the scene as much as possible. And by using that little selective brush, you can see how much more it stands out. The colors pop on it more, the contrast is better. So I really like what that's done. So if we go and take a look again, back to the beginning, we can see exactly what that's done. Now, I'm not sure I totally love the vintage effects that we went for here, so what you can do is go into your view edits, and you can see every single thing that you've done to it so far. So we can go back into vintage, and we can decide to change it, and we can maybe go for a different version. So maybe this one, maybe number 9 actually is the one to go for. Again, tone that style strength down just a touch and click OK. Same again, we could go to grainy film if we want, have a little go on that. So we go back and take a look at the image, on and off. I really like what it's doing. The last thing I'm going to do, this might not work very well, but I'd want to give it a try anyway. I'm going to bring the brush tool, I'm going to click the exposure one. Now plus 0.7 exposure on this is going to be a lot, so I'm going to tap down, bring it to 0.3. I'm just going to paint in with my finger on the sides of these buildings a little bit, just to help brighten them up, and then maybe just a little bit across this top garland. I'm going to click OK. I like how this is looking. But that basically brings me to the end of my edit. It's been only a few different tools. If we have a look at the edits, we can see that there is just a handful of small tweaks. It's only taken me a short amount of time, but I really like what this has done to the image overall. It's given it a really great cinematic look, it's given it a dreamy look, and I think that suits the Disney scenario really, really well. But hopefully that's been an interesting and a helpful video and a look at how I would go about processing this sort of image just using my phone. If you have enjoyed this video, please do hit that like button, subscribe if you don't already, and I will see you next time.